There are acts you can overlook in a person, but there is one specific deed that my spouse did while I was 8 months into an external assignment that I couldn't reason myself out of, no matter how hard I tried. Not because I'm angry, not because I haven't tried to justify it, but because some things, once you witness them plainly, cannot be ignored. My name is Steve Bennett. I'm 39 years old, and this is the story of what I came home to and what I did about it. I've been back on American soil for exactly 4 hours, and I'm sitting in the back seat of my father's 1998 Ford Crown Victoria in a Walmart parking lot on Marcia Sharp Freeway with my bags, holding my mother while she sobs into my shoulder. Not the homecoming I planned. For 8 months I was overseas. Dust, heat, 12-hour shifts, cold coffee, phone calls that failed at the worst possible moments. I had a whole vision in my head of what coming home looked like. My wife June at the gate, a real dish, my own bed, the particular silence of a Lubbock night. Instead, I'm here in a parking lot. How does a man even begin to handle this? My father is sitting upright in the driver's seat, staring at the parking lot like he's solving a math problem nobody asked him to solve. My mother had been asleep against the passenger window until I climbed in and woke her without meaning to. Eleanor's photograph, ruined frame, smoke-stained edges, is sitting on the dashboard like a passenger, like a saint on a broken altar. I've been in combat zones. I've seen things that don't leave you, but nothing prepared me for the sight of my parents living out of a Crown Victoria in a Walmart parking lot. Stay with me because this one will take you somewhere. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed. Trust me, you're going to love it here. Now, back to my parents. My father, Peter Bennett, 74 years old, 30 years as a mechanic, rough knuckles. He and my mother, Margaret, 69, have been married for 41 years. Margaret spent her career as a school cafeteria supervisor and her life as the woman who remembered every birthday in the church directory, brought meals to neighbors she barely knew, and hand-sewed June and me a wedding quilt over 3 months of quiet evenings. When June received it, she said, "Oh, how sweet," and put it in the closet. And then there's Eleanor, my little sister. 24 years old when a drunk driver ran a red light on University Avenue on a rainy October night and took her life in an instant. She was driving home from a study group. She was going to be a nurse. That was 6 years ago. Mom still keeps Eleanor's school portrait on the mantel. Every Thanksgiving, she sets Eleanor's place at the table, not as a performance, just because she cannot bring herself not to. I carry a copy of that same photograph in my breast pocket on deployment, over my heart, where I keep the things that remind me why I'm there. Now, that particular Wednesday night, my parents were home on Slide Road, same house, 39 years, and on a dry Lubbock summer night, the faulty wiring inside the walls decides it's done waiting. The fire spreads fast. Of course it does. This is West Texas. The wind helps everything it shouldn't. My father wakes to smoke already thick in the hallway. No warning. No time to think. He gets my mother out and they stand barefoot in the front yard in their nightclothes and watch 31 years disappear into smoke and West Texas wind. They get out with almost nothing, their car and one thing. Mom grabbed Eleanor's photograph off the wall on the way out. Didn't think about it. Didn't decide to. Her hands just did it. The way a mother's hands know things the rest of her hasn't caught up to yet. She made it to the yard, looked down, and there it was, Eleanor's face, cracked glass, smoke-warm frame, safe. That detail is going to live in my chest for the rest of my life. They had no insurance coverage sufficient for a total loss. Dad mechanic savings, modest honest money, weren't built for something like this. They weren't helpless people. Lord knows they weren't. But they were hurt, and they were old, and the night was very dark, and they had nowhere to go except one place, my house. They called June on the way over. No answer. Called again. Nothing. Tried a third time, silence. They pulled into the driveway anyway. Because where else were they going to go? They knocked on the door, 2 people in smoke-smelling nightclothes, no shoes, Eleanor's cracked photograph tucked under my mother's arm. June opened the door. She stood there and looked at them, and my mother, still trying, still holding it together the way she always does, said, "June, honey, there's been a fire. We lost the house. We're not asking to move in. We just need somewhere to stay for a few days." Said nothing. My father, the 74-year-old man who had never once in his life asked anyone for anything he hadn't earned, said quietly, "Just tonight, June. That's all." She said the house wasn't set up for guests, said she needed her comfort and her space, and couldn't have that disrupted. A 3-bedroom house, the door closed. My father put his hand on my mother's back and walked her to the car. He drove them to the parking lot of Walmart, off Marcia, and slept there that night. They slept in that car for 11 days before I came home while my wife ran her routine, undisturbed. I landed at Lubbock Preston Smith Airport on a Saturday morning, exhausted the way deployment exhausts you, not just tired, but hollowed out behind the eyes. But I'm home. I'm thinking about real coffee, about sleeping horizontally in a bed like a person. I called my wife. She said she was home and couldn't wait to see me. Then I called my mother. No answer. I call my father. He picks up after 4 rings. "Hey, son." Something in those 2 words stops me cold. I've known my father's voice for 39 years. I know every frequency it carries, and right now, underneath that careful steadiness, I hear everything he hasn't said yet. "Dad, what's wrong?" Not a question. He knows that. He tells me about the fire. He tells it plainly, the way men of his generation confess hard things, like he's reading from a report, like it happened to someone else, like if he keeps his voice level enough it won't hurt either of us. I'm standing in baggage claim, duffel at my feet, drawing glances from strangers, and I'm asking where they've been staying, and he goes quiet, and I say, "Dad, your mother called June." And a pause, the kind that's worse than any words. June said it wasn't a good time. I stood very still for about 10 seconds. A couple walked past me with a stroller. A kid in an Astros hat pointed at me and his mother shushed him. The baggage carousel turned and turned and turned. This cannot be what actually happened. "Dad, where are you right now?" "Walmart." "Off Marcia Sharp." "Stay there." I didn't go home. Didn't call June to tell her. I picked up my bag, walked straight to my rental car, and drove to that parking lot. Dad was sitting upright in the driver's seat, staring straight ahead. Mom was asleep against the passenger window, hands folded in her lap. Eleanor's photograph was on the dashboard, cracked frame, facing forward, like she was keeping watch. I opened the back door and sat down. I put my hand on my father's shoulder from behind. He reached up without turning around and covered my hand with both of his. We didn't say a word. Mom woke slowly. She turned. She saw me, bags under my eyes, fresh off a plane, come straight here, and she covered her mouth with both hands. Her shoulders shook and she didn't make a sound, which is somehow so much worse than crying out loud. I held my mother in that parking lot and thought, June did this. June put my mother here. I had been home for less than 2 hours. I drove to the house. June was in the living room when I walked in. She looked up from her phone and smiled, actually smiled, and said, "Hey, you're home early." I stood in the doorway of my own house and said very quietly, "Where are my parents sleeping tonight, June?" The smile adjusted. "Steve, where have they been sleeping?" "Do you?" Because from where I'm standing, it looks like my parents have been in a parking lot for 11 days. She set her phone down, crossed her arms, and then she did the thing I was not prepared for. She didn't apologize. She explained, "Steve, I can't just have people move into this house without talking to me first. I need my space. I need my routine. I'm not a caretaker. That's not what I signed up for. One night and then what? One night becomes a week, becomes a month. These are my parents. I didn't cause the fire, Steve. No, you just left them in a parking lot." She looked at the wall, then back at me. Then she said the line that ended my marriage, though I didn't file the paperwork for another few weeks. They've had their lives, Steve. I can't be burdened with other people's problems. They're not my parents. They're not my parents. The woman who ate my mother's peach cobbler, the woman my father walked to her car every single time, waiting at the door until her headlights disappeared down the road, the woman who received a hand-stitched quilt that took 3 months to make and called it sweet and put it in a closet. They're not my parents. I went back to the parking lot, helped my parents collect everything they owned in the world, 2 grocery bags. I drove them to my house, set up the guest room that had never once hosted a single guest in 4 years of marriage, and made chicken and rice soup from the recipe my mother taught me when I was 12. I told them to make themselves at home. The next 10 days in that house were a masterclass in psychological warfare. My mother woke at 6 o'clock every morning and tried to be invisible. She folded her laundry with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker. She apologized for things that required no apology. "Sorry for using the bathroom," she said once, and I had to leave the room. She kept Eleanor's photograph on the nightstand, and I'd sometimes walk past the guest room at night and see the light still on. My father said almost nothing. He sat on the back porch every morning with his coffee, jaw tight, eyes somewhere far away. Every time June entered a room, I watched that jaw tighten another half degree. June, meanwhile, had perfected the art of visible suffering. Loud sighs when the TV was on. Pointed comments dressed as observations. "Oh, someone used the good towels. That's fine." Delivered to the ceiling while looking at everyone. 3 to 4 hours a day in the bedroom with the door shut, emerging with the expression of someone enduring a natural disaster with extraordinary grace. She was unbearable, and my parents were working so hard not to be a burden in a house that should have been their refuge. About a week in, I woke at 2 o'clock in the morning to find the kitchen light on. My mother was at the table in her robe, Eleanor's photograph in front of her, coffee going cold at her elbow. I sat across from her, made myself a cup, didn't ask, just sat. After a while, she said softly, "She would have been 30 this year, Eleanor. Can you imagine her at 30? Honestly, terrifying." I said, "She would have been running something or leading a protest. Probably both simultaneously." Mom laughed. A real one. The kind I hadn't heard since I'd been home. Then she touched the edge of the photograph and the laugh faded quietly, and she said, "She used to say family was the only thing worth going to war for. The Lubbock sky at 2 o'clock in the morning is something else entirely. Stars enormous, horizon flat and wide, nothing between you and all of it but air. Somehow that makes everything both bigger and more manageable at the same time." I went back inside knowing exactly what I had to do. I just needed to do it right. If you have been listening for a while, do us one quick favor. Subscribe, hit the like button while you're at it, and share your thoughts in the comments. 3 days later, I sat June down. No yelling. I was done with yelling. Yelling felt like giving her something, and I was done giving her things. I sat across from her at the kitchen table, and I spoke the way you speak when the decision is already made, and the conversation is just a formality. "I'm not asking you to have been perfect." I said, "I'm not asking you to be someone you're not. But June, my parents loved you, and when they had nowhere to go, you closed the door of my house on them." She started to speak. I kept going. I've tried to find the version of this where I move past it. I've looked hard. It isn't there because I don't just know what you did. I know what it means, and I can't unknow that. "So you're choosing them," she said, flat, precise. "Over your wife, over your marriage." "Yeah," I said. "I am. You'll regret this." "Maybe," I said. "But not today." I looked at her one last time and said, "You should have just opened the door, June. That's the whole thing. That's all it ever was. You just should have opened the door." I filed for divorce 12 days later. I found my parents a rental on Frankfurt Avenue. Single story, covered porch, yard with room enough for a garden. Nothing fancy. The kind of house that becomes a home fast when the right people live in it. I paid for it. I say it because choosing your family sometimes has a number attached to it, and you pay it without blinking. Mom planted marigolds along the fence line, exactly the way she always did on Slide Road. Dad found a neighbor 2 houses down with a bad transmission and spent a Saturday under his truck in the driveway. When I asked if the neighbor was paying him, he looked at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language. Some people just are who they are. On a Saturday afternoon, about a month in, I helped Dad hang Eleanor's photograph above the fireplace. New frame, simple wood, clean. We'd retired the cracked one, though Mom placed it in a bedroom drawer rather than throw it away. I didn't say anything. I understood. Dad stood with his hands in his pockets and said quietly, "There she is. There she is." I said. The afternoon light came through the front window and caught the photograph at an angle, and for just a moment, Eleanor looked almost luminous up there. Present. Like she'd been waiting for us to find the right wall. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday. I drove to my apartment on and sat in the parking lot for a few minutes. Was I sad? Yeah. Parts of it I grieved, the early parts when I still thought I was seeing her clearly. Did I regret it? I thought about my mother asleep against the window of that parking lot. I thought about my father reaching back and holding my hand without turning around. No, I did not regret it. I started going to my parents' place most evenings after work. Real food, my mother's kitchen, then Dad and I on the porch with our coffee, watching the Lubbock sun do what only the Lubbock sun can do. The sky goes pink first, then amber, then a deep bruised violet that looks invented. Even on your worst days, even when you've lost your marriage and your parents are starting over, that sky insists on being beautiful. It's almost rude, honestly. About 2 months after the divorce, Dad and I were on that porch on a Thursday evening, coffee cooling in our hands, not saying much. We're both comfortable with quiet, always have been. One of those things I didn't know I'd inherited until I was old enough to notice. Then Dad said, out of nowhere, with the ghost of a smile at the corner of his mouth, "You know your sister would have handled all of this considerably louder than you did." I laughed, full and unguarded, the kind that surprises you when it comes out. She would have shown up at that parking lot with a camera crew. I said. She would have live-streamed the whole thing. June would be famous. She would have brought signs. Dad said. Multiple signs, professionally printed. Oh, absolutely. Eleanor never did anything halfway. Dad chuckled, low, quiet, and shook his head slowly. We sat there smiling at the same person, at the same memory, at the same enormous absence that still takes up space in every room we're ever in together. Through the screen door, we could hear Mom humming while she moved around the kitchen. The particular hum of a woman doing something ordinary and being completely content in it. The smell of whatever she was cooking drifted out onto the porch and mixed with the evening air and the faint iron smell of West Texas dirt. I leaned back in my chair. I'm 39 years old. My marriage is over. My sister has been gone 6 years, and I will miss her every day for the rest of my life. My parents rebuilt from ash and now live in a house on Frankfort Avenue with a garden that is, if I'm honest, already the best one on the block. I have lost things that don't come back. Some losses get lighter when you carry them long enough. Some you just carry. But on this porch in this light, with my father beside me and my mother's voice coming through the screen door, I know exactly who I am. I know what I chose, and I'd choose it again before the question finished being asked. Here's what I want you to take from this. When the fire happened, June had one moment, one door, and she looked at two people who I cherish so much, who loved her without reservation, without condition, without keeping score, and she closed it. That's the whole story. Everything else is just what happened because of that one closed door. Your parents will not always be strong. There will be a night, maybe there already has been, when they need you to hold things together. When they call and they're trying hard not to sound scared, and they're standing somewhere they never imagined standing. And in that moment you will find out something true about yourself that you cannot control. If you enjoyed this story, Hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment below. I will see you on the next one.